Hey guys, welcome back to another video. We are talking about the integer rules today. So these are our quick shortcut rules for adding and subtracting integers. So let's start first up at the top where we're talking about our scuba diver here. And this is something we have dealt with in the past when we talked about up and down, meaning positive and negative. So we know when we go down 25 feet, that means a negative 25. Okay? And then if we go down another 10 feet, that's a negative 10. So I'm gonna just kind of record out to the side because there's not really a space for it. Where he's at, or how many we've talked about so far, or how many feet we've talked about so far. So if we go down 25 feet and then go down another 10 feet, we're at negative 35 feet so far. Okay. All right, and we know if we go up 5 feet, that's a positive 5, and we can write the plus sign here, but I'm going to leave it off because we know that a regular number is a positive number. So if we're at negative 35 feet and we go up 5, now we're at negative 30 feet because we went just up 5, not up all the way. All right, and so then we know he's going down 50 feet. That's a negative 50. And we know that if he's at negative 30 and he goes down another 50 feet, we are now at negative 80 feet. And if we go up 65, that's a positive 65. Again, I'm just putting the positive in there for a second, but you don't really need it. So that's up 65 feet. And that puts us at, so if we talk about negative 80 and going up 65, we're going to go up until we are at negative 15 feet. And our last movement by our scuba diver is down 45 feet. So we know that is a negative 45. And where did he end up? Well, he went up and down, up and down. He went down another 45. So he was at negative 15 and he went down another 45 feet. That puts him at negative 60 feet. Okay, and moving right along. Positive and negative integers are positive and negative whole numbers, and then also 0 is an integer. So make sure you're including 0 in your definition of integers, which is something you already know. All right, now moving on to what do we do with integers when we have them. So there are a bunch of different situations with integers, but for right now, let's talk about addition problems. And there's only really 2 situations with adding integers. So if you look here, and I'm just going to highlight, you don't have to do this part. I'm just showing you what I'm talking about. If you see 5 and 8, what do we notice about them is that they're both positive. And if we look at negative 2 and negative 3, we notice those are both negative. So we have a situation where both are positive or both are negative. This is what we call same sign. Same sign. So what we do when we have the same sign is we just add the absolute values. And so what I mean by, I'll get to that in a second when I say the absolute values. But we're going to add the absolute values, and then we're going to keep the common sign. So these are things you should be able to type in if you're online, or write in if you're in person, or if you are online and you printed, that's fine too. But if we have the same sign, we're just going to add the absolute values and keep the sign. So let me show you what I mean by that. What I mean is a 5 and an 8, we're going to add those together, 13. And we're going to keep the sign. Well, the sign is positive here, so we're just going to leave that as a regular 13. This is true also of negative numbers. We add the numbers together, but we're not just adding their numbers, we're adding their absolute values, okay? So the absolute value of negative 2 is 2, And the absolute value of negative 3 is 3. And that is a little hard to see. Let me fix that real quick. 2 plus 3, which equals 5. But we're going to keep, don't forget, we're going to keep the common sign. And both of them are negative, so we're going to keep it as a negative 5. Okay, so that brings us to when we have a different situation. Okay, so if we have different signs, so let's look at our examples here. A positive 5 and a negative 8. One is positive, one is negative. Same thing with the second example. Negative 2, positive 3. One is negative, one is positive. So what we're going to do is we are going to, instead of add, we're going to subtract. We're going to subtract the absolute values. And then we are going to use the sign of the higher absolute value. Now, I'm going to explain a little bit about what that means. We are going to subtract the numbers. So let's go down to our examples, 5 and negative 8. So we have a positive 5 and a negative 8. We're going to subtract those numbers. So we're just going to do 8 minus 5. And I'm just going to go off to the side here. 8 minus 5 equals 3. Okay? And we're going to put a 3 down. Now we're going to use the sign. Don't forget, we've got to use the sign of the number with the bigger absolute value, the higher absolute value. So negative 8 has a higher absolute value of 8, so we are going to keep the negative sign. And I'm just going to take a second to explain why that works. If we have positive and negative, what that means is we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 positives, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 negatives. So what we're going to do is subtract them. So we're basically getting rid of the absolute, the 0 pairs. So we're getting rid of what we have in common, basically subtracting them. And then we're keeping whatever we have more of. So in this case, we have more negatives than positives because negative 8, there are more negatives. So I'm going to show you that one more time. We have negative 2 and positive 3. And I'm going to use just this little space right here where you're supposed to put your name. That doesn't really apply as much when we have notes. So you can use that space if you want to doodle. We have 2 negatives and 3 positives. And so when we go to cross those out, we have 1 positive left. And that works with the way we just learned how to do it. With negative 2 and positive 3, we're going to subtract the numbers, 3 minus 2, and we end up with 1. And what do we have more of? We have more positives than negatives, so we keep it a positive answer. You're going to get some examples to practice on here in a little bit, but that is our 2 different situations when we're adding and subtracting. Now, when we're adding same signs and different signs. Now, with subtraction, we have a little bit of a different situation. Subtraction is much easier to deal with when we change it to an addition problem. So, when we have a subtracting problem, what we can do, we don't have to do, but we can do, is change it to an addition problem. And then we just add them. Then we follow these rules over here, okay? So we're going to change it to an addition problem and then add them together. Kind of like this, you should already have some familiarity with this because we did this yesterday where we changed subtracting a negative or subtracting a positive to an addition problem. We rewrote those expressions. That's what we're doing right now. So, for example, 5, if we come down to our examples here, 5 minus negative 8, we know that's minus a negative. We can rewrite that as plus. So instead of minus negative 8, we're going to write plus 8. And then we just keep our number in the front. And now that we have an addition problem, we can solve it. They're the same sign, so we add them and we keep the sign of the two numbers. We keep the positive. Okay, and then one more example. We have negative 2 minus 3. So remember we said we can change this from negative 2 minus 3 because having negative 2 and then minus 3 is the same as having negative 2 and a negative 3, right? And we can just change that to an addition problem. So negative 2 plus a negative 3. And now we have the same situation where we have a negative and a negative. That means that we have the same sign. So we add the numbers. You don't have to do all this circling. I'm just doing it so you know what I'm talking about. So we add the numbers, which is 5, and then we keep the sign that we have in common. They're both negative. Okay, so that is our problems for today. I'm going to jot down, those are our notes, but I'm going to go through a few examples before you go to practice because I want you to just have a little bit more time with it. So you can feel free to read through these other things, but we're going to go down here and we're going to write a couple of example problems. So we have negative 5 plus a negative 7, okay? All right, both of these signs are the same, so if we look at our notes, if they're the same, we add and we keep the common sign. So same add, so 5 plus 7 is 12, and we're gonna keep the negative. A couple more examples. We have, let's try a 3 plus a 10. 3 plus 10, I mean, that one's pretty straightforward. They're both positive. They're both the same sign, so we are going to add and keep the sign. 13, and it's a positive 13. Negative 10 plus another negative. Let's try negative 5. So both signs are the same, so we are going to add. We get 15, and we're going to keep the negative. Okay, so that's a few of just the same sign. Let's try some that are different. So let's do a negative and a positive together. Negative 4, and we're going to add a 2 to it. Okay, so these signs are different. So we are going to subtract and take the value of the higher absolute, or take the sign of the higher absolute value. So we're going to subtract 4 minus 2 is 2. And what do we have more of? We have more negatives than positives, so we're going to make it a negative. You know that if you went out here and you did your algebra counters, then you would have more negatives left over. That's why you have a negative answer. I'm going to try a couple more. Let's try 3 plus a negative 9. And I should put a parentheses when I have double signs like that. So 3 plus a negative 9, we're going to subtract those. 9 minus 3 is 6. And what do we have more of? We have more negatives than positives, so we're going to write a negative answer. And one more. Negative 5 plus 20. We have different signs. So remember, different signs subtract, same signs add. So they're different signs. We subtract 20 minus 5 and we get 15. And we have more positives than we do negatives, so this is a positive answer. We are going to talk more about changing some subtraction problems to addition. I'm going to show you a couple of examples, but we will also have more practice within our online and in-class work. So let's say we have 7 minus 8. Okay, So right now we have 7 minus 8. We know that subtraction is a little more difficult than addition, and we have the ability to change this to an addition problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to change it to addition. We can't just leave it like that because that would just be changing it to addition. But we can say a 7 minus 8 is the same as a 7 and a negative 8. So we change the subtraction to addition and then use the opposite of whatever that number was. So 7 plus negative 8. And now we have same or different. These are different. So we're going to subtract, which means we will subtract 8 minus 7, which is 1. And we have more negatives, so it'll be a negative answer. We're going to do that one more time. 12 minus 15. All right, so we have 12 minus 15. We're going to change this to an addition problem, but we can't just change it to addition. We have to make sure we're using the opposite, which is negative 15. So now that makes more sense. We have 12 and a negative 15, like 12 minus 15. And now we know these are different, so we're going to subtract. 15 minus 12 is 3, and we have more negatives, so we end up with a negative answer. 2 more examples, and then I'll let you go. Let's say we have 10 minus a negative 4. So here's where we get into minus and negative. So these, either we're going to be subtracting a positive or subtracting a negative here. We have 10 minus a negative 4. So we can change this to addition. But if we change the problem to addition, we also have to use the opposite of the second number. So we know 10 minus negative 4. We have 2 negatives here together. So we can change that into 10 plus 4. And then you just have 2 same signs, so we add 14 and we keep the sign. I'm going to do one more like that. Negative 6 minus a negative 8. And you see these 2 negatives together. We're going to change that to addition. So now we have negative 6 plus 8. They're different signs, so we'll subtract them. We have 2. And we have more positives than negatives, so our answer should be positive 2. Make sure you glue these notes in and use them when you are going through, especially your IXL practice, okay?